Commissioners for Friday, January 24th, 2020 to order. Commissioner Barnes, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Can we have the roll call of the commission, please?
Chairman Johnston,
Here.
Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Keel, Vice Chairwoman East, Commissioner Cavilla, Commissioner McNinch, Commissioner Almberg, Commissioner Hubbs, Commissioner Valentine.
Thank you. Can we have those CAB members who are present, please identify who's here? Thank you all.
Green light.
And are there any CAB members in Reno?
Gene Green, Carson City. JT Chevalier, Douglas County. Steve Robinson, Washoe. Alan Lavoie, Lyon.
Thank you. And I believe we're also tied into Elko as well, correct? Do we have any CAB members in Elko?
Jim Cooney, Elko.
Thank you. With that, we'll close agenda item number 1 and move on to agenda item number 2, approval of agenda. Chairman Johnston, for possible action, the commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Any public comment on the agenda in Elko? Is there any public comment on the agenda in Reno?
No comment in Reno. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any public comment on the agenda here in Las Vegas? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for any further discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion to pass the agenda as presented as is.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented by Commissioner Hubbs, seconded by Vice Chairman East. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, approval of minutes. Chairman Johnston, for possible action, commission minutes may be approved from the November 1st and 2nd, 2019 meeting. Has everyone received copies of the minutes? Any comments to the minutes? Commissioner Valentine.
The only comment I've got, Chairman Johnston, is that on page 9, referring to Mr. Yannick, I'm sorry, completely lost. But anyway, he's referred to as being a member of the Clark cab, and he's actually a member of the Carson cab.
I don't know if Mr. Yannick is still a member of the cab from Carson City. I think we could just take out the reference. I think that was something that Mr. Yannick was doing with the cab workshop on his own at the request of the department and the commission. So we could, I think, just delete that language representing the Clark Citizen Advisory Board for Wildlife Management.
Excuse me, Chairman Wallace. This is Reno. I have a cab member that has a comment on this.
Okay, if you could hold off until I get to public comment, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Chairman.
No, that's okay. It's just hard with people on the phone. All right, any other comments from the commission? Okay, this is an action item. Is there any public comment in Elko on the minutes? If I may make a request, since we're via telephone and video link, if there's no comment, I just need to have confirmation that there's no public comment from Elko. I wonder, is Elko still in contact with us?
I've just sent a text message to Ms. Panunzio to check to see what her status is, and I haven't heard back yet.
Okay. With that, we'll see if there's any public comment in Reno on the draft minutes, and then, or do I need to wait?
Chairman Johnston, Gene Green for the Carson Cab. Mr. Yannick was there representing us, even though he's not a cab member. He was designated by us to make the comment.
Thank you. Any other public comment in Reno?
No more comment in Reno. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I still have not heard from Elko. I'm going to make a phone call.
Thank you.
Okay, per communication from Elko, they have no comment.
Oh, thank you. Can they hear us?
They can hear us. There's a 1-minute lag on the YouTube video, but they're having trouble communicating back through the phone system. Their landline is not able to connect to the conference line. We've done it in the past and it's been fine, so we're not sure what the problem. They use a cell phone to call in, but they're not able to communicate back, and we're not 100% sure why. So we're going to do our best to communicate through text if you're okay with that. And I can either report back. If we have to put a cell phone up to the microphone, we might have to do that to get through.
All right. Well, I guess we'll proceed. So they're at least receiving the meeting.
That is correct.
And they will let us know if they have any public comment on an action item.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. With that, then, that concludes the public comment on the agenda item number 3, approval of minutes. I'll bring it then back to the commission for any further discussion, comment, or a motion. I would make one comment. If Mr. Yannick was there on behalf of the Carson Cab on certain items with respect to that cab workshop, I don't think he was particularly representing any cab for that entry in the minutes. That was just something that he was providing, not in any type of representative capacity, so I think it's best to omit that language, but certainly make the change. With Mr. Hyatt was on behalf of the Clark County Cab and not the Carson Cab. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with those 2 changes. One, removing the identification of Mr. Yannick as representing a cab in connection with the cab workshop, and correcting that Mr. Hyatt was speaking on behalf of the Clark County Cab.
Second.
Okay. Everyone clear on the motion? Motion made by Chairman Johnston, seconded by Commissioner McNinch. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. With that, we will move on to agenda item number 4. Member items, announcements, and correspondence. Chairman Johnston, informational. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. correspondence sent and received by Secretary Wasley may also be discussed. The only thing I have in this regard, I received numerous correspondence, as I believe almost all of them, if not all of them, were copied to all of the other commissioners. All of the correspondence I received were on either on agenda items for tomorrow, specifically the black bear hunt and the lion hunt. I forwarded all those on to the department, so they're part of the record, and I did that electronically via email, as that was the form that they came to me. So those are the only correspondence I received.
And just to confirm, every email that we received from you, I forwarded on to the CAB members, or excuse me, the commissioners that may have been, that were missing from the distribution list.
Thank you. Any other member items or announcements? Commissioner Valentine?
Thank you, Chairman Johnston. I've had a couple of individuals request that the commission entertain the possibility of relooking at the mandatory sheep indoctrination course. Was wondering if that's something the commission could look into and discuss in future agenda items.
Any other member items? Secretary Wasley, anything?
No, Mr. Chairman, the department is in receipt of all the correspondence you shared. At this time, I believe everything that the commission has received, the department is in possession of, and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, then, we'll close agenda item number 4 and move on to agenda item 5. County advisory boards to manage wildlife. Member items informational. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Any CAB items here in Las Vegas? Mr. Casanelli?
Tom Casanelli, representing Humboldt County. We had an issue with the new system, draw system for elk, where we're going to be making cow elk run consecutive with bull elk, not splitting them off and having bonus points for both. And my issue was the way I read it, the draw will be, if you put in for cows and bulls together, they will take whichever draw comes first. If you draw a cow tag, you would get that tag even though you drew a bull tag at the same year. And there's a lot of concerns. People don't even know it right now. It better be told to the people, to the public, that that's the way it's going to be, because then they'll stop putting in for the cow tags. And then when I brought that up, they said, well, I've got all these bonus points I've accrued for cow tags. I just got to lose them. And I was wondering if we could make some type of system that's similar to the draw system for units, where you apply for your elk tags and you say, if I draw a bull tag, that's over, and a cow tag, I want the bull tag first. And there's quite a bit of concern at our meeting over this issue. And I don't know how to resolve it. I've come up with a lot of scenarios, putting in the cows with bulls, but then you'd have to combine the bonus points for each, or make an average of the bonus points between each of them. But it's something that I think we need to look at, or at least educate our sportsmen to the way the draw systems are going to be, and so they can, because when they find out they drew a cow tag and they could have had a bull tag, I don't think that's going to go over well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casanelli. Mr. Bunch?
Good morning. Glenn Bunch with Mineral County Advisory Board. It was reported in the media and everywhere else this last couple of weeks that Idaho had removed approximately 200 head of elk from their herd, and a lot of people were asking how come we couldn't have moved some of those elk into Mineral County. And so with that, I know that it takes a lot to do it, but we need to have a management plan in place to do that. So that what we'd like to say is maybe we need to get an action moving on a management plan. So if some neighboring state has some animals to get rid of, rather than to shoot them and dispose of them, that we could maybe somehow either transport them to Mineral County. We'd like to have some. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional cab comments here in Las Vegas? Any cab comments in Reno?
No comment in Reno, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any cab comments from Elko?
No comment in Elko.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on from agenda item number 5 to agenda item number 6. Reports informational, agenda item 6A, Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Midwinter Conference, Secretary Wasley and Commissioner McNinch. A report from the conference held in Monterey, California will be provided by the attendees. Commissioner McNinch, Secretary Wasley, I don't know who's going first.
Typically, I go first, and then Tony comes in and cleans up. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, the Midwinter Waffle Meeting in Monterey, January 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I'll give I always try to pull out a few items from the Commissioners Committee, just kind of state-related type stuff that may or may, might have some interest here. And then, as usual, I'll ask Director Wasley to fill in some blanks, provide some more detail on some things. I don't take notes as fast as I probably should on some of that stuff, so there's always a few holes that he can fill in for us. So during the commissioners meeting, so these meetings are typically broken out into a number of committee meetings, and there is a commissioners committee, and the state puts together the states put together reports for the commissioners that are going to a binder, if you will. So first thing I wanted to say was I do appreciate the time that the department puts into putting that together, and while there might be some changes, I'll touch base on that in the future with the Commissioners Committee. A lot of work goes into those state reports to put them together so that other states and other commissioners can read those. So I appreciate the time that goes into those. For our report, typically what I'll do is I won't go over the report itself specifically in the meeting because they can read that, but I'll pull stuff from our agenda items from the last time from the last meeting, and kind of go over try to keep it, kind of fresh. So typically that's what I do. And with respect to our meeting, there were some interesting things going on. Arizona continues. I always look at Arizona as being a few years ahead of us. We're kind of following the same path with regards to the things that they deal with from the attitudes towards wildlife. So they've got a very urbanized state. We're very urban here. So the things that they go through and the things that they have to manage are things that we're going to, or that we're just a couple years behind. So one of the things that they're working on is they're trying really hard to keep an informed populace. So they're spending a lot of time on messaging, trying to get their public to understand, so that they're making decisions based on information that is at least in part coming from the department. So if they're not sportsmen, if they're making choices on, not based on a whole bunch of, that they're getting a balance of information, let's say, so that they're making the decision to not hunt and fish rather than making decisions to fight all aspects of the agency. And it sounds, if you think about some of the things that we've dealt with here, you can kind of relate to the things that they might be trying to manage. So they're trying to do these things where they're trying to talk about the conservation work that they do and be more public. And Nevada's done a great job with that here over the years too. Especially the last few years, there's been a concerted effort to provide more information and open those doors for those conversations to occur. And I think it's really important. And I know that they see positive results in Arizona, and I know that we're seeing them here. They have a little campaign that they're doing, and it's just simply, I am ethical. And basically they're asking their sportsmen to take a pledge to be ethical. Here's the ethics that are lined out with being a sportsman, being a hunter, a fisher, trapper, whatever. Here's some ethics to try to draw awareness to the people that are operating within the system to, create that awareness amongst them that, hey, we have obligations as sportsmen to be ethical about things. And I can see that transitioning into wildlife viewing or anything else. It's not just with sportsmen, but there's probably going to be a need to do that kind of stuff. I know for me, when I bird watch, there's ethics in bird watching. You don't look at a bird that's in front of somebody's bedroom window. You don't look into their bedroom window at the bird. But those are things that if you don't talk about them or you don't draw those lines with people, you just don't think about. So I thought that was see how that pans out for them over the years. I was a little surprised to hear that some of the states are really, they have some funding challenges, similar to 10 years ago, that they're really struggling, that they have some real funding issues. They're not sure how they're going to pay the bills and get things done. So I was a little surprised by that, considering that things seem to be pretty stable most everywhere else. So I guess it just plants a seed in my mind. Don't forget that it could be us. It just takes something happens somewhere, and so kind of grateful for the fact that things seem to be pretty stable here in Nevada. We could be in that same boat, and it's not fun. So there have been a number of increases. There's been increase in some of the fundings for a number of wildlife-related appropriations at the federal level. Things like the state wildlife grants. It's my understanding that there was about a $3 million bump in money that's available there. There's $9 plus or minus $1 million that's been made available for chronic wasting disease study. That's a big deal. There's been a 25% increase for wild horse and burro programs, and it's my understanding that there's some strings attached to that, like if you have to have a plan on how you're going to use it, type of a thing. Some pretty basic stuff. So I think that's of note, because we don't usually hear about these increases in funding towards these wildlife related things very often, and it just seems like there's a little bit of a money flowing into some of that stuff right now, which is good news. I've got notes everywhere. I'm sorry. There's a number of acts and processes that are up for review. For example, the Pittman-Robertson is in the process of reauthorization. Migratory Bird Treaty Act is currently or will be going through a review, or currently is reauthorization. The NEPA reform, there's a reform and streamlining process for NEPA. There's a fuel reduction, fuel break plans that are coming out for review, having to do with trying to manage some of these large scale fires that we've had to deal with in the West. So there's a lot of things happening in that arena, more than I've noted in the past at these meetings. Just seems to be ESA, the Endangered Species Act. There's revisions going in on that to kind of clarify terms like foreseeable future, removing provisions barring reference to economic impacts. These are all things, for better or worse, that are going on. There's a lot more involved to that than I've just laid out. I just think it's important to note that there's a lot of conversation going on with the Endangered Species Act and making clarifications on some of the terminology in the act. So two more quick things. The The Commissioners Committee, it was kind of an interesting conversation. Historically, the committee will go through and do some state reports. Everybody gets a few minutes to talk about the things going on in their states. And then the second half of the day is kind of a review of, we'll pick these, these things that, topics or issues that are of interest to the group that, kind of a self-education type thing. For example, one of the topics that we asked the states to provide updates on were, what are we doing, what's each state doing for fair chase? So there's these, this kind of a self-education thing. And this year, some of the conversation really leaned towards what else could the Commissioners Committee do? And remember, you're in an environment where you have largely representation of commissions in there. Myself, I'm the only one from Nevada, but there are other commissions that have all their commissioners there. So they might have 5, 3, 5, 4, different commissioners at their meetings. I've always been very, I say this because of where we're headed with this. I've always been very cognizant of the fact that that Commissioners Committee has once or twice, there's been conversation about taking votes to take certain actions. And I can tell you that for me personally, I've avoided that like the plague. The one time I walked out of the room, the other time I made sure they understood that I'm abstaining. I'll listen to what you guys are doing. They really don't go anywhere, but anytime they start talking about taking a direction or things that should be in an open forum or that should require collaboration and votes at this level, I become a pretty staunch listener, and in certain cases I'll just walk out. It's very, very infrequent, but the conversation came up. What can the Commissioners Committee, what can they do to add value to them being there? That's really what it boiled down to. I think the commissioners that attended the meeting feel like they have more to offer. Not quite sure how to do that as part of that Commissioners Committee. So there was some discussion with that. It was taken to the directors, the Commissioners directors meeting. Is that the same day or the next day, Tony? The next day, I guess. But and kind of brought up like how can the commissioners add value to being there and being involved? And I think it's a work in progress. It's kind of in the director's hands a little bit. I think that they heard what the commissioners were bringing up, and I'm not 100% sure where it'll go, but there might be maybe some modification to how that commissioners committee might function in a sense. I can't see it ever coming to a point where there's going to be formal votes on stuff, things like that. But rather than just being a forum to network and talk about issues and trying to get ideas and trying to do some self-education, maybe something else comes out of this process, these conversations. I don't know, but we'll keep everybody up to date on that and let you guys know where it's going. Tony, did I cover that okay? Or
Yeah, I wouldn't change anything he said. I'd just maybe provide some broad, high-level overview of the meeting structure. This is the midwinter meeting for WAFWA. It's significantly shorter, lower attendance. The midsummer meeting, sometimes you'll get 500 people. The midwinter meeting, it's set up for 2.5 days, Friday, Saturday, and a business meeting on Sunday that's usually done midday. Between 100 and 200 attendees. There's some other meetings that are kind of attached on either end. On the front end, on January 9th, Thursday, was the Colorado River Fish and Wildlife Council meeting that includes all the Colorado River states, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. So technical fisheries folks from those states meet for the morning, and then the afternoon the directors from those states join and take any necessary actions. There's been a lot of discussion and coordination on issues like AIS, for example, over the last couple of years for the Colorado River Fish and Wildlife Council. On Friday the 10th, first half of the day was the Sagebrush Executive Oversight Committee. Obviously, being a sagebrush state, this is important to Nevada. That's a committee that I've been tasked to chair, but we also had our Habitat Division Administrator, Alan Janae, present, as well as our game staff specialist, Sean Espinoza, who has responsibility over sage grouse. There's 11 sage grouse states and 13 sagebrush states. We also have our federal partners around the table, including USGS, Fish and Wildlife Service, NRCS, Forest Service, and BLM. So there was considerable discussion about the state of the sagebrush biome, post-fire re-veg, state of the species, and considerable discussion around the efforts currently underway to capture the conservation efforts. There's a conservation efforts database that all the states are feeding into. There's also a disturbance matrix to capture the disturbance on the landscape, and then some discussions around some public meetings that are going to be occurring around the West, one of which will be hosted by the Nevada Department of Wildlife in Reno. It's a stakeholder engagement effort to really kind of launch the sagebrush conservation strategy. So you might hear more about that. And then, as Dave mentioned, there was a directors forum and a directors commissioner forum. So a lot of topics of discussion that Dave mentioned. Just a couple additional topics that that I either didn't hear or he didn't mention. A lot of updates on the federal legislation, Recovering America's Wildlife Act, discussion around the relevancy roadmap that's on our agenda today. We'll hear more about some of the strategic planning efforts under WAFWA. There's a great deal of change right now, not only with our federal partners, but with state wildlife agencies as well. And there's a kind of an air of uncertainty in the states and in many of our federal agencies. And so there's currently a strategic planning effort where WAFWA is looking at its strategic plan and making sure that the committee structure and members are truly getting value. And Dave alluded to some of those conversations amongst the commissioners, and so WAFWA as a whole is doing that as well. Dave mentioned the increased funding for wild horse and burrow management. We did get an update from the BLM. They've established a $1,000 incentive for horse adoption. They said that seems to be working really well, at least initially, in reducing some of the horses that are in holding facilities. So that might make a little bit of space, but as we all have seen and understand, that would just be a short-term solution. So that was the Colorado River Fish and Wildlife Council met on the 9th. WAFWA was officially Friday, Saturday, Sunday. At the conclusion of the business meeting on Sunday, that overlapped with another meeting that we had staff present for, and that was an R3 effort. It was about retention, recruitment, and reactivation of hunters and anglers, and that was Sunday and Monday and maybe part of Tuesday. I'm not sure on that. So really, I think Dave covered it, and with those few additions, I think that's a pretty thorough report.
So I didn't mean to punt to you so soon, because I was going to make a comment on the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. So that was my fault. There's actually, from what I took out of the meeting, I think there's reason to still be optimistic about the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. This is the third go around, and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has taken a real major role. So this is kind of the broader association, not a regional like WAFWA, and they have done a ton of on-the-fly changes. I think that's the best way to have it. They've been very mobile, very light on their feet to try to continue to garner support congressionally and to move this funding opportunity through the process. And it did pass the House floor. There's a House floor vote. It's out of committee, and there's a House vote any time now if it hasn't occurred already. There seems to be strong bipartisan support. So there's a lot to be optimistic for about there. And some of the tweaking that they've done had to do with the distribution of the money. So, for example, one of the things that was added was the proportion of threatened and endangered species, which there's advantages to that and disadvantages. For Nevada, I think that would probably benefit us from a funding standpoint, not substantially to the detriment of other states. But it did bring up one concern that does this preclude energy going into actually delisting a species? You know, if you're getting money because of the number of threatened and endangered species you have, is that what's the word I'm looking for? Unincentivize, de-incentivize getting them off the list, doing your conservation activities. But these are the things that they've had to do to continue to move the conversation along. And and I thought it was real important to bring it up here and talk about it just a little bit more. During the commissioners meeting, I kind of sat back and I didn't bring it up like I do to you guys, and it never came up. And it bothered me. So if I'm attending WAFA meetings in the future, I'll be kind of pushing conversation in the commissioners committee, just because it just seems like it's off the radar all the time, and it's a big deal. Not that I have to convince any of them or anything, but it's important enough to talk about it or ask somebody to come in and give us an update on it, rather than hearing it at the business meeting or unless you're hanging around Tony, who's up on this stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to add that real quick. So, thanks.
Any questions for Commissioner McNinch or Secretary Wasley? Vice Chair East?
Director Wasley, Commissioner McNinch mentioned that some states send more people. Would it be worthwhile for us to look at a couple more commissioners going, maybe not to the midwinter, but to the summer conference? I would be interested in going at some point.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think I find great value in it. And as I know Commissioner McNinch has attended for a long time, and I've mentioned to the commission before that we really have almost quarterly meetings. We have the summer meeting, which is the large, well-attended WAFWA conference that's greater duration and more engaged in terms of all the different committees. Then we have the midwinter meeting, and in between those two meetings, we have the North American, typically in March, and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies meeting, typically in September, that are attended by the entire membership, 50 states, plus our Canadian provincial and territorial partners. Our Deputy Attorney General has been engaged with some of the legal committees. For me, it's not only the awareness, the professional development, but it's the networks and learning about some of the challenges. And so Commissioner McNinch referenced Arizona, and so I think there'd be a great opportunity to engage with your peers in other states. Everybody has subtle differences in their processes and their challenges, but that sharing and creating and being part of those professional networks is invaluable. It's an opportunity to develop unified positions on key issues, where whether it's the legal committee or the commissioners or the directors, developing unified positions and then floating those up through those associations and out through the business meeting provides a unified, strong platform to try to affect change in some of those areas. And then the access to high-level officials. So again, we had the principal deputy director, Margaret Everson, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in attendance, and a number of individuals from all of our federal partners from the Washington office. So it provides a great opportunity to engage with those individuals as well. So I think we would support that. I think it would warrant some budgetary issues that we need to work out. But I think the broader we can expose folks to those opportunities, the better we all are.
I would agree, and I think anybody that wants to attend, I'm willing to go on my own dime if I need to. So, I've had plenty of opportunity to go to these things, and I get something out of it every time I go. And if somebody else is interested, I think you should express your interest and get it done, because I think you'd get a lot out of it. And there's a lot going on. It's amazing. And, I can't tell you, I've gotten a lot, they have some of the forms that you're in have a way of calibrating you more than you can get calibrated in here, and or ground you, or whatever the case might be. Create an understanding that you didn't really see before. You guys are always good about that for me, but I can tell you, you still get things there that I think you'd be surprised, the things that you pull out of there. Sometimes you go home really thinking about it, really thinking about things sometimes, give different perspectives. So, and there was one other comment. California has a new executive director. Their commission has an executive director of its own that operates independently of the Tony's equivalent in California. And they did express an interest in possible joint meeting at some point in the future, whatever that means. She didn't have a specific time frame or a date, but she just said that it had been a long time, and that their commission, that their commissioners hadn't expressed an interest in having a conversation on if that's something that might be of value. So we've done it a couple times in the past. May not seem like you have a lot in common, but there's actually things that you can sit down and talk about. There's things that are going on back and forth that are worth sitting down, listening to, hearing about, and having those conversations. So to throw that out there.
Commissioner Hubbs.
Yes, I was interested in knowing, I know a couple meetings back, we talked about some of the new regulations that were passed for some of the killing contests, specifically in New Mexico. You brought it up that it was talked at, and I believe Arizona, and I believe that was in 2019. I've also heard from the public, the general public, wanting to revisit the analysis in those state processes. What was looked at? Did we miss anything here in Nevada when I know we had a petition for looking at killing contests as it relates to coyotes only. I believe I wanted to look over those notes. I can't quite remember our state's position at that time, but I've been receiving input from the general public that we should look into some of the analysis that went into these close proximate states. So I didn't know if that was brought up in the meeting at all this time.
The kind of from a high level, just the concept that they had done some stuff, that Arizona in particular had taken action to. They have a new state law that basically says that you can't have prizes, and you can't have cash or other prizes, basically. So it didn't outlaw the activity itself. It just said that you're not going to basically celebrate with prizes for winners, and encouraging, what really prompted it were the whack and stack pictures that you see, where they, somebody goes out and there's a picture of 150 coyotes in a pile and they won a big prize for it. And so Arizona took the measure to say, hey, we're not doing that. We're not going to have prizes. We're not going to have cash. We're not going to have that kind of stuff. And I know that presents challenges in Nevada with some of the groups that raise money that are very supportive. Big, we got fraternity here. We got, Nevada Bighorns, and there were some issues with the effort that were made that put some of that at risk. And I don't think that that's the intent. I would hope that that's not the intent of those efforts. But Arizona had to, they split the hair that way.
I did spend some time looking over some of the state's regulations, and it also seemed to pick up on what you were speaking about with this whole concept of ethics and hunting. And a lot of them appeared to rely on the whole notion of wanton waste of wildlife, that those contests actually kind of advocate for wanton waste of wildlife. And so they opted to block just that activity in and of itself. Across species boards. They didn't selectively choose like one, species, but just the activity in itself was wasteful.
Any additional questions? Okay, anything else, Commissioner McNinch or Secretary Wasley? All right, with that, we'll then move on to agenda item 6B, the Department Activity Report. Secretary Wosley, a report will be provided on Nevada Department of Wildlife Activities. Secretary Wosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start in the director's office with an announcement that Game Warden Captain Mike Maynard has accepted the Chief Game Warden position. The department led an exhaustive internal and external search, and after many conversations with the law enforcement division, determined that Chief Mike Maynard's experience would only enhance the department and the law enforcement division. So you may have seen press releases either on the department's social media channels or out in more conventional media, but I wanted to make that announcement and congratulate former Captain, Chief Game Warden Mike Maynard. An update on Recovering America's Wildlife Act. We heard a little bit about that. Presently 165 co-sponsors, including Nevada representatives, Congressman Stephen Horsford and Congressman Amedee. The House resolution would provide approximately $1.4 billion in dedicated funding to state and tribal fish and wildlife agencies for conservation and monitoring at-risk species. The bill was first heard in the House Natural Resources Committee on October 17th and passed out of committee, I think it was December 4th. Commissioner McNitch talked about some of the changes in the formula. There were concerns by some that there wasn't enough funding dedicated to species recovery, and so they changed the formula a little bit to provide more money to states that had a higher number of listed species. Commissioner McNitch talked about, potentially disincentivizing downlisting or delisting species. There was also some concerns brought up by the directors that essentially were rewarding those states who've been least effective in conserving species. We're going to give federal money to states who haven't effectively conserved species and consequently have a higher number of listed species. I think that would, the change in the formula actually, I think takes a little bit of money away from Nevada, but not an appreciable amount. We're still very supportive. All states, all 50 states are very supportive with the possible exception of one state. In being Alaska, there are some concerns that have been voiced in Alaska. I think most of those concerns are centered around some of the language as it pertains to the tribal piece to that and some of the history between Alaska Fish and Game and some of the tribal interests and some of the jurisdictional authorities in those areas. Aside from that, there's overwhelming support by all 49 other states, and I'm not sure that Alaska has taken a strong stance on that. I've just heard some of those concerns voiced. Commission General Regulation 487, Bait and Tackle, was passed by the Ledge Commission on December 30th. This is the regulation that updates and simplifies regulations for the use of live bait fish and other tackle restrictions and provides consistencies on interstate waters. The department's leadership has recently began hosting regional quarterly meetings. Our goal is to meet quarterly with each region to enhance communication and department leadership interaction. We administered a survey of our employees the last couple of years, and one of the things that we heard is that they have a desire for more interaction, communication. This is something we launched a couple of years ago, but it kind of went away, so we're reinvigorating the effort. We met yesterday. Our Las Vegas office came down early and had a full complement of our leadership team present. We had employees come down from Tonopah and from Lincoln County and Overton Wildlife Management area and had a good turnout. Had a good question and answer session and updated employees on many of the things that you all have the opportunity to hear in this report in part. The director's office has been involved with many significant meetings over the past couple months. I've met with the producers for an Animal Planet series who are presently actively filming in Nevada. They got some good video in association with the recent moose captures up in Elko County. They were present at the bighorn sheep release in the Lake Range on the Pyramid Lake Reservation. They're interacting with staff around the state. It's our goal to not just focus on the biology or law enforcement, but to really elevate the state of Nevada and a lot of that be through the eyes of the employees, the incredibly passionate and purposeful employees at the Department of Wildlife. So we're looking more broadly than just wildlife, and we're looking more broadly than either biology or law enforcement. That will result in 12 episodes that will be aired over a 12-month span, roughly one per month. And I believe that they anticipate being prepared to air the first one about June or so, sometime midsummer. So we'll keep the commission apprised of those efforts. Couple of side benefits to that is that the department has editorial license on that. So I jokingly say if they're filming and Deputy Director Rob falls out of his truck, we have the editorial license. We can show him being more competent than stumbling out the door of his truck, and we don't have to show that. So having that editorial license it provides us a level of comfort. We also have the opportunity to obtain all of the B-roll, everything that they don't use from these things. So it's incredibly high quality, large volume that we can use through all of our social media channels, show these releases and captures, and again, the purpose, the passion, and professionalism of our folks. So we'll keep you apprised as we go forward there, but really, really exciting. It's the same company that produced Lone Star Law in Texas and Northwoods Law in Maine. I believe I've shared a little bit about this with you before, but when they first approached us, I had some conversations with the directors from those other states to try to understand if there were any pitfalls, and what I quickly learned was from Maine, and I asked if it made a difference, and they said, well, it quadrupled the number of calls that we received to get the squirrel out of our gutter. So we wanted to make sure that we were coming at this from the right angle, and we weren't just going to place a larger burden on our folks, but we're truly going to highlight the state of Nevada and all that it has to offer, and hopefully more broadly than just wildlife. Deputy Director Rob and myself attended an interagency bear management meeting that was held in Tahoe a couple weeks ago, working with California Fish and Wildlife, California State Parks, Forest Service, and others. Very, very positive meeting. I had an interview regarding enhanced conservation through broader funding, an article for the Nevada Capital News, I believe it is. That's an article that is out now. It's a fairly broad article. It does reference the makeup of the commission and some of the views around representation on the commission. We can share that with you as well. Met with staff from the Fish and Wildlife Service as well as the Nature Conservancy regarding department activities, as well as potential future expenditures associated with the conservation bond that passed last session. None of that money is available yet based on the bonding capacity of the state, but at some future point, we will have as much as $30 million available to the Department of Wildlife to expend over a 10-year period when it's determined that the bonding capacity of the state can justify the sale of some of those bonds. I flew to DC in early December for a couple meetings, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Executive Committee, as well as the North American Wetland Conservation Act Committee. It's pretty interesting. I know Commissioner Hubbs has referenced the State of the Birds report, where we saw a decline, 2.9 billion birds over the last 50 years. As we look at all those biomes that show market losses in the birds, there's one exception to the trends that we see, and that's the wetland species, and in particular ducks and geese, where we're seeing exponential growth there, and in large part, I believe that's attributable to the wetland and waterfowl conservation efforts in this country, and North American Wetland Management Plan and Conservation Act have contributed billions of dollars to wetland conservation, and I think despite the negative trends and the loss of birds, I think that is positive in that it demonstrates some of the benefit of some of those sportsmen's organizations contributing through Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, California Waterfowl, and the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. So it does provide some hope that in these focused, concentrated, well-funded efforts, we can make a difference and reverse those trends. The department just completed an audit that was requested by the Legislative Council Bureau to review employee timesheets and grant funding that included Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson funds. Preliminarily, we're fairly optimistic with the results. I would like to point out that the department has experienced 19 audits in the past 14 years. Since 2006, we've been audited 19 times in various capacities. 14 of those audits have occurred in the last 7 years. So we have an average of 2 audits per year for the last 7 years, and they run the gamut from our federal aid audits through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to some of our law enforcement audits to IT audits, timesheets, coding, granting, and I think it's been very positive, both in terms of the results, the lack of findings, or the subtle findings that have helped us to only be better. It's pretty interesting when I have conversations with some of my counterparts, not only in other states, but in other agencies in the state of Nevada. I know of no other agency in another state or in the state of Nevada that's been exposed to that level of scrutiny. And we look at it as an opportunity to demonstrate our effectiveness and welcome the opportunity to have some of these audits. Despite the disruption of day-to-day business, it is a good opportunity to demonstrate our accountability, responsibility, and the transparency with which we conduct our business. I did provide an opportunity to do an interview with our agency podcast with conservation education staff. We kind of did a 2019 year in review, as well as discuss the agency's priorities for 2020. And lastly, from the director's office, the department's leadership team has begun working on the biennial leadership conference. This year's conference will be held late February at the Pepper Mill, and will be full of important topics, talking about the relevancy roadmap and improving our engagement with customers and the public. We have about 120 folks, so approximately 40% of our staff or so will have the opportunity to attend that. From the game division has hired a new wildlife health specialist, Dr. Nathaniel LaHue. Nate comes to us from Wisconsin, where he's been working with the University of Wisconsin and Wisconsin Department of Health Services on the Milwaukee Angler Project. He has served in several roles around the nation, including work with Washington State University and Virginia Tech. He holds degrees as both a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine and a Master's of Preventative Veterinary Medicine. Although his first day with the department will be February 10th, he has been attending captures to familiarize himself with our process, procedures, and personnel. Our former wildlife health specialist, Dr. Perry Wolf, has accepted the position of executive manager for the Wildlife Disease Association, as well as chair of the board for the Wild Sheep Foundation, and will be officially retiring from the department very soon. Her contributions to the department are substantial, and although we expect Dr. LaHue to fulfill her former role effectively, her experience and expertise with the agency will be sorely missed. The department coordinated with Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe on the previously mentioned bighorn sheep restoration efforts that occurred earlier this month. The tribe received a large grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to support the initial bighorn sheep reintroduction and building staff to support monitoring and management of bighorn sheep into the future. Several weather delays had complicated the completion of the translocation, but this has been a substantial success story for the state of Nevada and the Paiute tribe. Bighorn sheep have again been reintroduced into their historic range as a direct result of biological expertise, commitment from our sportsmen and women, and intergovernmental coordination. I just want to quickly address that I have seen some interesting dialogue and perhaps debate in the social media channels about why is Nevada, giving away sheep to somewhere where sportsmen can't access them? And we'll hear a little bit more about this later when we talk about a request that we've received from the state of Washington for pygmy rabbits. But I'll tell you that Nevada has been the beneficiary far more than we've been the contributor in these instances. When we look at our pronghorn antelope, we look at our elk populations, our mountain goat populations, our Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, our California bighorn sheep, we've been on the receiving end far more than we've been giving, and there is a great benefit. Again, this comes from some of the WAFWA, AFWA, some of these meetings where commissioners are discussing opportunities with one another, biologists are. There is a general appreciation and understanding amongst all partner agencies and states that there is great value and benefit in redundant populations. The more that we have out there, the better off the species will be. So whether or not our hunters can access those sheep for whatever reason is really neither here nor there. The species is better off, the agency is better off, and we'll continue to cooperate, coordinate, and contribute in any recovery efforts or establishing redundant populations where we can. Monitoring for chronic wasting disease continues with about 400 samples that have been collected or are in transport to the Wildlife Health Lab. Of that total, so far 294 samples have been returned with no positive detections of chronic wasting disease in Nevada. 3 hunters have turned in meat from deer and elk harvested in Wyoming that was confirmed to be positive for chronic wasting disease. All meat has been incinerated at the Nevada Department of Agriculture Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. Game Division staff attended the Department of Defense and Consolidated Group of Tribal Organizations, CGTO, meeting in Las Vegas mid-November to discuss current and future bighorn sheep management activities. The CGTO is made up of 17 Southern Paiute tribes from California and Nevada with continued strong spiritual ties to bighorn sheep and a deep interest in their welfare, not only on the Nevada Test and Training Range, but throughout the Southwest region. Game Division staff also attended the annual Nevada Cattlemen's Association annual convention in Elko to promote increased communication between cattlemen, wool growers, and the department. Biologists attended the wool growers breakfast and stressed the importance to maintain separation between domestic and wild sheep while simultaneously continuing the respect of the wool growing industry. The department's working with the Nevada chapter of the Wildlife Society to host a raven workshop in Elko during April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. The workshop is being designed to educate participants on the challenges with raven management and collaborate on innovative methods to reduce raven density on Nevada's landscape. From the Habitat Division, the technical review program continues to provide ongoing administration of the Energy Planning and Conservation Fund and the associated Cost Recovery Fund, which was AB 307 from a couple legislative sessions ago. It's about cost recovery to help provide funding for some of our activities. During the 2019 calendar year, 14 different AB 307 applications were submitted by energy projects for two different pipelines, 5 transmission lines, and 6 solar facilities, respectively. In the first quarter of 2020, the technical review anticipates significant time will be spent reviewing and assessing the implications of proposed changes on the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, under which the department provides significant feedback and coordination with our federal land management agency partners for projects impacting wildlife across the state. Private landowner has donated 160 acres in Mason Valley near Yerington to be added to the Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area. The new property extends the eastern boundary of the Wildlife Management Area near Miller and Iozzie Lanes. The Walker Basin Conservancy purchased the water rights from the property as part of their water acquisition program to increase flows to Walker Lake. A portion of that water will remain on the property, allowing the department and the Walker Basin Conservancy to work together on a restoration plan to establish native vegetation and control noxious weeds on the property. Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area is one of the department's most popular areas and now contains nearly 18,000 acres. Wildlife Heritage application period is open until March 2nd, and as we'll hear here shortly, the funds available for fiscal year 21 are anticipated to be approximately $1.268 million. The new Habitat Project tracking database and project planning tool are in development and proceeding smoothly. Base layer geographic information system layers that include soils, weather data, and ecological site descriptions that are commonly used for planning have been reviewed with the contractor, and we expect beta versions of the planning tool and wireframes of the project database within the next 2 weeks. 2019 wildfire season burned approximately 82,000 acres across Nevada. However, the department is still working on restoration actions from the 2018 season. And currently, we have over 55,000 acres of wildfire rehabilitation efforts in action. Additionally, during 2019, the department completed approximately 11,000 acres of PJ treatment with an additional 4,300 acres currently under contract. The Northern Water Development Crew is finishing up the build schedule for 2020 and working internally on purchasing materials in preparation for a busy year. North Crew construction projects will occur in the Wasatch Mountains, Calico Mountains, Trinity Range, Kama Mountains, and Butte Mountains, among others. The Southern Water Development Crew is already amid their build season and is working on projects in the Arrows and Desert Range. Other projects for the year will be completed in the Mormon Mountains, Volcanic Hills, and San Antonio Range. In the Conservation Education Division, more than 150 people attended the annual recognition banquets for the volunteer outdoor education instructors in the Las Vegas and Elko areas. Several instructors received awards for 25, 30, and 40 years of service. A Browning shotgun was generously donated by the Carson Valley Chucker Club for the 40 Years of Service Award. In addition to receiving recognition for their contributions, the volunteers received training on using the new Volunteer Event Manager for documenting student participation and volunteer hours. Conservation education staff worked a Boys and Girls Club event located on 9th Street in downtown Reno. Staff had 3 stations and the theme was trout. Department staff had a macro station where the kids learned about the different bugs that lived in the water. We also had a build a trout and a new fish spawning game. 41 students were broken up into groups depending on grade level, which ranged from 1st through 7th. The event was an effort to follow our Fish and Wildlife Relevancy Roadmap and focusing outreach to more diverse communities. Our goal is to work with the Boys and Girls Club regularly from here on out. Public information officers worked with the Nevada Division of State Parks, the Nevada Department of Natural Resources, Conservation Natural Resources, and the Nevada Division of Water Resources on a press release relating to the temporary closure of Cave Lake as a safety measure that we're taking during construction on the Cave Lake Dam. Staff also worked with agencies on a story by the Associated Press on dam safety regulations in Nevada. Post by conservation staff on the platform Nextdoor, urging Reno neighborhoods to be cautious of wildlife on roadways, grabbed the media's attention and was featured in This Is Reno, a local website dedicated to daily news. In November, the Con Ed PIOs did interviews with Lake Tahoe Television, Channel 2 News, KOLO 8 News, educating residents about being responsible in bear country as bears build up calories before going into hibernation. They also started a social media campaign on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram featuring different wildlife in Nevada that would benefit from the Recovering America's Wildlife Act if the bill passes. The campaign has been well received by the public. Every post gets positive comments on the agency's work, likes and shares, and questions wanting more information. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies often reshares the post to their national audience as well. Con Ed staff partnered with the Wild Sheep Foundation once again for the 2020 Reno Sheep Show, which was held January 16th through the 18th at the Reno Sparks Convention Center. Thousands of children registered for this event, and the turnout for the Youth Wildlife Conservation Experience section has been close to 4,000 in attendance. Staff and volunteers worked with a variety of educational stations, including fly tying, archery, casting, and wildlife education. At the main booth, staff assisted customers with their accounts and profiles in preparation for the Nevada Big Game application period that will begin March 16th. This event is a great opportunity for the attendees, resident and non-resident, to speak with game biologists about the different species Nevada has to offer. Con Ed will partner with Safari Club International for the 2020 Reno SCI show, which will be held February 5th through the 8th, also at the Reno Sparks Convention Center. And there'll be a youth wildlife exhibit section very similar to what was offered at the Sheep Show, in addition to a variety of educational stations, again, including fly tying, archery, casting, wildlife education. The SCI will have a very large fish tank that'll give kids a chance to fish for live rainbow trout. From the Diversity Division in Northwestern Nevada, staff have completed monitoring for American pica across 8 populations. While some populations remain mostly stable, persistent losses were apparent in the High Rock region. It's possible that some of these losses may be due to disease outbreaks of plague. Department staff continue to work with the Habitat Division on multiple geothermal projects that focus on springs and impacted taxa such as kangaroo mice, shorebirds, as well as bats. Diversity staff participated in and hosted this year's annual meeting of the Nevada Bat Working Group that represented the largest turnout yet. Biologists from 8 state and federal agencies, as well as individual consultants and students, attended with topics addressing the revision of the Nevada Bat Conservation Plan, status updates from ongoing bat research and monitoring projects across the state, results from the 2019 Bat Blitz, and the selection of Northeastern Nevada for the 2020 Bat Blitz. A new type of bat detector called an Anabat roost logger was deployed in a very remote cave in the Virgin Mountains in southern Nevada. This cave was discovered by accident 10 years ago and has piles of guano spread like carpet throughout the cave, and in some places is more than 12 inches deep. This indicates high use by bats, likely in the summer, but due to the remoteness of the cave, it's difficult to get into in the summer with the Mojave heat. This new bat detector will provide species identification of the kinds of bats using the cave and will provide valuable information regarding how and when bats are using the cave, which may be an important maternity site or migratory stopover for Mexican free-tailed bats. 2020 Department Coordinated Nevada Winter Raptor Survey is off to a great start. The survey covers 70 driving routes across the state, documenting and providing information on the distribution, status, trend, and habitat used for over a dozen raptor species, several of which are species of conservation priority. Surveys are conducted by department staff as well as federal agency biologists, non-governmental organizations, and volunteers. This year also involved diversity staff reviewing and updating the route maps to ensure clear and consistent survey coverage, and a Survey 123 app that has been developed to digitally collect data in the field. Over the past 6 months, the biologists in Fallon have been working with National Audubon Society's Saline Lakes program staff to digitize and analyze over 30 years of shorebird data from Lahontan Valley. Lahontan Valley was given a hemispheric importance designation in 1988 and is an internationally recognized important site. This past fall, weekly Gila monster and desert tortoise tracking commenced, focusing on determining final hibernation locations. Monitoring will now occur bi-monthly for these 2 species until they become active in the spring or early summer. Diversity Division held their annual coordination meeting over 3 days to prioritize work for the coming year. During the meeting, division staff surveyed a mine in southern Nevada where over 30 bats of 3 different species were observed hibernating in the mine. 2 types of the bats, the Townsend's big-eared bats and Myotis bats, were sampled for white nose syndrome. It's particularly important to take samples from the Myotis bats, as we know that in other parts of the country, white nose syndrome has heavily impacted these species. In Nevada, we have few areas that we know of with hibernating Myotis, and because they tend to hibernate in very small crevices, high in mines or caves, obtaining samples is difficult because we're able to get over 10 Myotis samples on this particular survey. From the Fisheries Division, although the winter of 2019-2020 snowpack is still uncertain, we anticipate summer 2020 should provide excellent angling opportunities across northern Nevada. Major reservoirs including South Fork, Wild Horse, Rye Patch, and Lahontan are currently at or above normal storage levels because of the good water year in 2019. 2019, the Aquatic Invasive Species Program staff performed over 43,000 watercraft inspections and 1,100 full vessel decontaminations statewide. Approximately 60% of the inspections and 75% of the decontaminations were right here at Lake Mead and Lake Mojave. For 2020, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation has provided additional funding to support AIS inspection stations in Laughlin on the Colorado River and at Lahontan Reservoir. Staff are working with the Duck Valley Tribe to improve watercraft inspection capabilities at Wild Horse Reservoir in Elko County for the 2020 boating season. Department staff are continuing to investigate strange lesions on native red band trout in the Bruno River drainage that were first reported by anglers this past summer. Initial reports indicate that whirling disease is not the cause. We are working with state fish pathology labs in Idaho and Arizona, but at this point, they are as puzzled as we are as to the cause. The California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment issued a fish consumption advisory for fish from Topaz Lake on October 15th. The advisory on mercury levels is inconsistent with the one developed by the department and the Nevada Department on Environmental Protection. It includes rainbow trout, which are not in the Nevada advisory, and some fish species that don't occur in the lake. The reason for their advisory is unclear, and it wasn't developed in coordination with any Nevada agencies. Samples will be collected by our fishery staff for mercury analysis by EPA at several waters statewide this spring. These samples are collected annually on a rotational basis to update fish consumption advisories for the public in cooperation with NDEP, as well as a response strategy for 2020 in the event that new hazardous algae blooms are detected at locations in northern Nevada. Winter trout stocking for urban fishing ponds in southern Nevada began in mid-November and will continue through March or April, depending on water temperatures. Catchable-sized rainbow trout are stocked at multiple locations in Clark County in southern Nevada, including Sunset, Lorenzi, and Floyd Lamb Parks, the Boulder City and Mesquite Urban Ponds, and the Beatty Fishing Pond. Western Region staff are working with the town of Minden on development of another urban fishing pond for western Nevada. Siemens Pond is located northeast of downtown Minden. The town is working with us to deepen the pond and provide fishing docks and public access. In early January, NDEP reported a spill of around 25,000 gallons of partially treated acid mine drainage into Tabor Creek in Elko County. An investigation by the department staff found no dead or stressed fish and normal pH and temperatures. However, it's likely that snow and ice upstream may have caught most of it, and we may have issues during spring runoff, but we'll continue to monitor. The Devil's Hole Pupfish Midwinter Survey counts were completed the week of January 6th. Adult fish numbers were similar to recent years' winter's counts and indicated a good carryover of fish into the spring of 2020. Algae was unusually abundant for this time of year, which should help maintain conditions in Devil's Hole into spring and summer. Recent hydrologic assessments have indicated that efforts from long-term dewatering at the Long Canyon Mine Project in Goshute Valley could extend as far as Independence Valley on the west side of the Goshute Range, which is the home of the ESA-listed Independence Valley Speckled Dace. Department staff are working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, and Nevada Gold Mines to complete an updated full status assessment of the endangered dace. This has not been completed since 2009. The dace and the Independence Valley tui chub occur only in a large privately owned wetland in the valley. Fishery staff are working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to develop a programmatic safe harbor agreement for the critically endangered ESA-listed pahrump poolfish. This agreement will allow landowners and other partners to use private ponds to maintain additional refuge populations for conservation of the poolfish. A similar agreement is being used to rear and maintain populations of endangered razorback suckers and bony-tailed chub at the lakes and desert shores in the Las Vegas Valley, contributing to the recovery of those species. Fisheries staff are continuing to spend considerable time working with partners on addressing ESA listing petitions for multiple Nevada aquatic species. Those activities include both providing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biological information on species status and distributions, and on implementing proactive conservation actions that may help the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service come to a decision that ESA listing may not be warranted. Listing decisions on 19 spring snail species, the relic dace in Goshute Valley in Elko County, and the Dixie Valley toad in Churchill County are expected in 2020 or 2021. From Data and Technology Services Division, the department continued to see growth in license sales again in 2019. There was a total of 125,201 fishing licenses and 95,875 hunting licenses sold in the calendar year of 2019. This is a 48% growth in fishing licenses and a 37% growth in hunting licenses compared to 2017 before the CalComI system was implemented. Online renewals for boat registrations opened December 1st. This was the first year the department processed auto renewals of boat registrations for clients who chose to opt in for this feature via the CalComI system. There were nearly 10,000 boats successfully auto renewed at the end of December. The license office staff has been providing customer support to anyone requesting help with reporting harvest return cards. There's been a 78% completion rate of harvest return cards as of January 13th. The division is working closely with CalComI and the Conservation Education Division to send both email and text reminders to the remaining 6,200 hunters to have them submit their return cards before the deadline of January 31st. In conjunction with the Fisheries Division, a voluntary angler survey developed in the CalComI system was tied to 142,000 customer accounts who purchased a fishing license in 2019. The survey will remain open for customers to complete through the month of January. The license office staff saw a successful opening of accepting applications for spring turkey hunts. That opened on January 13th. The Geographic Information System staff completed the necessary updates to the fishable waters map for the 2020 fishing guide and the LEC database updates for 2019. Staff also finished the Survey 123 collection app for both the Harvest Check-In, which is used by regional staff offices for any species harvested that have a mandatory check-in, and the Winter Raptor collection tool, which will be used by diversity staff when they start to survey raptor nests. Also, just want to make you aware that the fishing guide is out at this time. The updated fishable waters maps are included in that, along with some informative articles, one in particular referencing the lost art of small creek fishing. Getting a lot of positive feedback on that guide as well. Lastly, from the DATS, Data and Technology Services Division, the Information Technology staff deployed new tablets for both the Habitat and Diversity staff for use in the field for data collection. From the Law Enforcement Division, the last divisional update, wardens in the Eastern region responded to approximately 10 lions in leg hold traps this year. One was euthanized due to the location and time of the incident. Wardens issued 2 separate citations to lion hunters for illegally possessing lion pelts without following the sealing requirements, an additional suspect for possessing a lion without a seal after he attempted to take it to a taxidermist in Idaho. 28 trapping violations are under investigation, including 12 baited sets, 2 visitation violations, and 14 unregistered traps. 3 mountain lions came into urban areas in the eastern region, and wardens have advised hunters and homeowners of their options relating to attractants. One incident was an issue of people feeding deer, in which case the homeowners were given a warning for feeding the deer. An investigation is underway concerning a trapper who shot a mountain lion in a trap and then attempted to check it in, violating NRS 501130. Criminal complaint is being filed with the Elko County DA on that. Game wardens helped with a body recovery at Wild Horse Reservoir, where a citizen plunged over a cliff near the dam and died in the lake. The temperatures were below 0 degrees Fahrenheit as officers attempted to launch a boat in the partially frozen lake before being stood down due to the dangerous conditions. While checking traps near Double Mountain, an Eastern Region game warden found a suicide victim in his truck, coordinated with other responders regarding removal of the body from the area. The game warden in the Southern Region was first on scene to a presumed suicidal subject that turned out to be a severely intoxicated driver who had pulled to the side of the freeway. 4 game wardens attended the Hunter Education Awards banquet on January 4th, and several received tenure awards for being instructors. All Eastern Region game wardens are currently hunter education instructors. This is a hands-on way to learn what is expected of hunters in the field and an important way to meet new hunters in a positive light. Traffic stop made by the interdiction team, the Nevada Highway Patrol, and Washoe County Sheriff's Department along I-80. The department was called to manage raptor talons that were found in the vehicle. Upon investigating, the suspect from California had deer meat with a valid tag in the vehicle, along with freshly cut raptor legs and talons stored in a shotgun shell box. Suspect stated he found a raptor where he was hunting in North Dakota and thought the legs would be interesting to have. The raptor parts were seized and the suspect was cited for possession of the raptor parts. This investigation is ongoing. Person who was suspected of killing a 4x4 deer on an illegal tag recently pled guilty to furnishing false information to obtain a license tag or permit, which is a misdemeanor pursuant to NRS. He was ordered to pay a civil penalty of $2,895. Southern Region Game Warden issued a citation to a subject for the feeding of big game. The individual had been given a warning of the action a few weeks prior to the citation. Another game warden issued a warning for feeding wildlife in the Cold Creek area. Game wardens have been actively taking steps to stop the rampant issue of feeding deer in southern Nevada. Southern Region Game Wardens are working with Lincoln County Sheriff's Office regarding dogs that broke free from a home and killed a deer in Caliente. Southern Region Game Wardens investigated 2 trapping cases, including one that had become a local news issue regarding lawfully set traps that had been stolen. Multiple citations were issued for other violations throughout the case, and charges are pending on the subject who stole the trap. Thank you very much for providing me this important time to share so much of what we do. Truly appreciate the opportunity, and that concludes the department activity report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Wasley. Any questions for Secretary Wasley? I'd just like to congratulate Chief Game Warden Maynard on taking on that post in light of former Chief Game Warden Turnipseed's retirement. That news was certainly well received by me, given the working relationship between this commission and Captain Maynard. So my congratulations to him on that. And I just want to say I thought it was awfully exciting to see on the news the reintroduction of the bighorn sheep. Some friends who are close to me worked long time, perhaps longer than I might be alive, because it goes back decades, I believe, in an effort to do that. So that was very exciting to see on the morning news, as that did get media coverage, at least in the Reno market and area. So with that, it is a little after 12, and some of us have been here since before 8. I would like to take a break for lunch now. Is the Conservation Partners Spotlight individuals here for agenda item C? Okay. How long is that going to take? A couple minutes. Okay, because I also have a scheduling conflict, which I have to be on the telephone at 12:30 with a judge in Yerington to address what I do in my normal daily life in the midst of this Wildlife Commission meeting. So I am happy to start with that conservation spotlight and that agenda item, but I may step out around 12:15 because I need to make phone calls before the phone call. As only lawyers would say, I got to have a phone call before the phone call. So in any event, if it's the flavor to proceed, let's do that. If you see me get up and exit, I want you to understand why. It's not to be disrespectful, but judges don't take too kindly when they adjust hearings to accommodate one's schedule and then you're late. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item 6C, Conservation Partner Spotlight. Secretary Wasley, informational and overview of a key conservation partner program will be shared with the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief.
Brief as you were on the prior activity report?
Much briefer. Again, thanks to Vice Chair East for creating this standing agenda item that gives us an opportunity to hear from many of our conservation partners. Today, we have the Southern Nevada Trout Unlimited. This is an organization that was established approximately 23 years ago, back in 1997, actively working to improve cold water fisheries in Nevada. The main focus of this organization is to maintain quality trout waters for all to enjoy and for future generations of fly fishers. Southern Nevada Trout Unlimited has been working and volunteering with the department on projects such as Trout in the Classroom. They volunteered as what we call Trout Buddies for nearly 20 years, since 2001. Trout Buddies helps the students with trout releases and with program curriculum. Additionally, the Southern Nevada chapter has volunteered for fishing clinics, Free Fishing Day, Junior Fly Fishing Club, and the Clark County Fair. Southern Nevada TU has also assisted on various habitat and campground improvements out at the Wayne E. Kurtz Wildlife Management Area. We're thankful for their ongoing support of NDOW Angler Education and our fisheries program. And with that, happy to turn it over to one of our conservation partners that we're happy to have the opportunity to spotlight for you today, and this is Southern Nevada Trout Unlimited.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Matthew Stewart with the Southern Nevada chapter of Trout Unlimited. We've, like he said, we're established in 1997 as a charter for the National TU. In our chapter, we have about 300 members. Our primary focus is with the conservation of cold water species. With the NDOW, we partnered on several projects, mainly on their angler education, partnering with fly tying classes, the Trout in the Classroom, things like that. Wayne E. Kurtz, we partnered with Wildlife Habitat Improvement of Nevada on planting trees and improving the campground there. So we've been focused on a lot of different projects. We've enjoyed the partnership with the NDOW and things like that. So if anybody's interested in finding out who we are, we have our website, sntrout.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have monthly meetings at Bass Pro Shop and Sportsman's Warehouse. And we have several times we have speakers from NDOW come, biologists and things like that. So it's been a great partnership. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was quick. But thank you very much for taking the time to be here today, sharing with us what your organization does, and we thank you for what you do for Nevada and its wildlife, and especially programs that are directed towards the youth in the state. So thank you very much. I know I probably speak on behalf of the entire commission when I share that on our behalf, and thank you again for being here. With that, we will close agenda item 6C. We'll break for lunch till let's make it 1:30. That gives everybody an opportunity, since there are no real convenient places to eat near this facility, and the cafe, according to the sign this morning, said it's closed until further notice. So we'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.